The idea for this presentation came because I was sitting down at a dealer table at a recent meeting, and someone looked over my shoulder and asked about the detail on my want list. And all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, I was giving a presentation. Let me give you a brief background of my collecting history that maybe you haven't heard, and how it led to the creation of my inventory lists. As you know, I started as a worldwide collector, but as countries outgrew my album, they got one of their own. After I retired and joined the club, Germany was the first separate album I set up, and then I needed a way of preparing a listing of the stamps that I needed. That was the start of these inventory listings. I get much of my stamp collecting joy from going through envelopes, bags, and stock books of stamps. I needed enough detail in my want list to be able to pick out stamps I needed or wanted from these inexpensive sources. Hence the reason for the various detail. I will admit, in my opinion, my current method's not as good as Victoria's want lists, which contain colored pictures of the stamps she needs. I currently have only created want lists for the countries that have migrated from my worldwide album. So here's an example of my want list. This is what my current Antigua want list looks like. Crossed out lines are stamps I've acquired since the list was printed. For example, numbers 24 to 27. In my past life, I was an accountant, auditor, and was comfortable and familiar with Excel spreadsheets, so that's what I use. I started with an Excel template for inventory because it used pivot tables. My listing shows from left to right the Scott number, the description, the color, the value or denomination, whether I've got a mint or used copy, catalog values for both mint and used. And on some worksheets, I add a feature column for adding additional information about different formats and perforations. All the information on the list has come from the Scott's catalog, and my pricing is from $216. Notice that this listing does not show all the Scott numbers. I can print this listing from my inventory file and use pivot table features to print only the stamps I need. The purpose in developing an inventory was primarily to create want lists. I wanted enough information on the list to ensure I purchased the correct stamp. As many people know, when you're looking through stamp books, they don't necessarily have the correct Scott's number under each one of them. So now let me show you how I got there. So here's the Antigua listing as it currently appears on my computer. You will notice the crossed out numbers on the listing shown earlier, 24 to 27, do not appear on this listing, as I've updated the listing on my computer, even though it has not been reprinted. When I acquire a stamp, I try and update the computer file by indicating whether it's a mint or used copy, where I purchased it, and what I paid. You'll also notice in the far left column, there are Excel rows of the spreadsheet missing. For example, it jumps from 11 to 21. You'll notice in the shade title boxes, there's little drop-down boxes in the lower corners. The one for mint is underlined, and it's different than the others because it's been activated. When I click on it, it brings up a drop-down box. It indicates only rows with blank in this column will be displayed. You will notice that when I select all box and click OK, all the rows in the spreadsheet reappear. This is what a pivot table in Excel allows you to do. You will also notice the mint drop box is now the same as the others, as nothing is activated. If you scroll down, you can see whether I have a mint or used copy of the stamp, if known where I purchased it and what I'm paid. I'm not sure if this information is going to be of any value to somebody trying to dispose of my collection after I'm gone. As another example, if we decide to click on gutter mint, here's what we get. I have gutter mint stamps for Antigua from number 325 to 328. I can also use this to find stamps I've added to my collection from an accumulation I purchased. On the complete worksheet with all lines showing, I can go to the drop-down box and under the purchase date details, tick Vance 2019. And when I click OK, I'll get a listing of all the stamps I added to my collection from this accumulation. And you're also able to do multiple selections. Let's say, for example, we want to do colors. So I've ticked off black and red, blue and green, dull rose, lake, orange. So when we click OK, all the stamps with those colors now appear. And you'll notice that we have no other restrictions in place. So the mint and used stamps that I have are also showing up on this list. If we restricted the mint and used column, as you can see, color has been activated, mint and use is activated. The mint and use are no longer there because we ticked blank only. There's no limitation to the combinations that you can use in the pivot tables. I usually only print worksheets with just the blank ticked under mint used. I currently have 21 want lists in my traveling folder. That's not 21 countries, as several have several lists, such as Germany with 5, regular issues, semi-postals, airmails, officials, and occupation. Now, I've decided to give you a little bit of a lesson on how to create a pivot table for your own stamp inventory if you're interested. I'll admit I'm not a pivot table expert or an Excel expert for that matter, but for this next part, I'm expecting you to have a basic working knowledge of Excel. An easy way to start when you open Excel is to go to New, and you should see a template for inventory listing with highlighting. Mine's at the top, as it's the one I use regularly. Yours will probably be down below where the other templates are. When you open it, this is what you get. I would erase or delete all the cells in the worksheet below the headings. Delete the for reorder column and the discontinued column, as they have special formatting in them that we don't need. So here's where you're at now. Now you can customize your titles, add columns, add rows, change column widths, and adjust formatting as desired as you would in Excel. This is just an Excel spreadsheet with a special feature. This worksheet is the pivot tables, and as for how do pivot tables work, they just do. On this empty spreadsheet, by clicking the drop-down box, it shows nothing else to tick. Now, let's add a list of colors to under the description in rows where the stamps would be. So you can see we've got numbers down one side, and we've put descriptions of various colors under description. And now if we open the drop-down box, all the colors that are listed in that column are shown. The drop-down box is simply a listing of all the unique items in that specific column. Now, if we wished only to see green items, we would just tick the green box. And when you click OK, all the items with green, number 3 and number 5, show up. Now notice that the blue-green item did not show up and the greenish item did not appear. The drop-down box is not a search function. It's simply a listing of the unique items in that column, and they have to match exactly. If you were to make a typo, and let's say we spelled green with only one E, that would appear as a separate item in the drop-down box. When you do the selection, it only brings up the ones you select. So in order to get the greenish one and the blue-green, we'd also have to tick that box. You can tick as many of these boxes as you want. You can also not use a range like items under $10, but you may tick as many unique items as you wish. There's no limitation. Now, one last hint I'll show you is, let's say under column 1, we wanted to put all the Scots numbers, and we're going to go from 1 to 1,000. We put the number 1 to start with in cell B4. And that number can be anything you want. If you decide that you're collecting the US and you don't want to ignore the first 200 numbers, you could put 200 in that box. It doesn't make any difference. Now what we want to do is shade the entire column. And you need to shade as far as you wish to go. And it doesn't matter that you go past the size of the pivot table. This pivot table is only 25. The standard one in the Excel template is only 25 lines. So we shade the entire column. So when you put the one in there, we want to go to the home page and we want to go to fill. When we get to fill, we want to click on fill to bring up series. When we get to series, we want to click again to bring up a dialog box. And this again gives you selections. So you want the series, we want our series in a column. We want it to be linear, meaning it just goes up in a consistent basis. And we want a step value of 1. And I've suggested we stop at 500. So now when I click OK, and that step value can be anything you want, but if you were using Scotch, you probably just want to go with 1. So now you click on OK, and you'll notice the entire column has been filled with numbers on a sequential basis. And if we drop down to line 25, we'll see that Excel has increased the size of the pivot table without us doing anything. It's gone right down to the end of our shading. Unfortunately, I only shaded down to line 47, so it has stopped at number 44. But you can continue that again. And the numbers sitting in those columns are not formulas, they're numbers. So what we can do is we can add a number. For example, if we needed to add 4A, we simply insert a line and key 4A into that cell. And all the other numbers have been dropped down by 1. So when you're adding Scott numbers, you can do the same thing with deleting. You can just delete. But when you add a row or delete a row, be careful that you add an entire row and not just the cell. Okay. Here's another way I inventory stamps. This is just a plain Excel spreadsheet. So back in 2019, I decided to create a worldwide inventory to see where my stamps were coming from primarily. If I purchased in a collection or accumulation, it gave me an estimate of how many stamps I got out of it and a guess whether my guess value for what I paid for it was appropriate. Here's a screenshot of the Excel worksheet where I keep track of where my stamps came from. Now, the countries are listed on the left-hand side. At the top of the listing are those which I have separate albums for, and below where the rest of the countries are listed. Basically in the order they appear on my albums, basically alphabetically. In most cases, I did not count the stamps in the album when I started tracking in 2019. For example, Canada shows 65 stamps, which would be the stamps I've added to my collections since 2019. You might notice there's a large adjustment to Berlin, and that's because I recently completed my Berlin collection and just decided to see how many were there. I'd also like to highlight something here for the worldwide collectors in our club, and that is the number of worldwide stamps I've added to my collection from the swap shop to date in 2023. I've added 944 stamps from our swap shop. In 2022, I added 1,207, and in 2021, I added 1,272. That's almost 3,500 stamps in 2.5 years. I also got rid of 3,500 duplicates, all for the cost of mailing a few letters. The swap shop mailing started during the pandemic by Klaus. A regular business envelope is mailed to those in the swap shop on a regular basis. You'll receive an envelope containing 100 worldwide stamps, for example, such as this. You select those you wish and replace them with your own duplicates in the same category. There are several different categories. I believe the most popular is large worldwide. Examples of other categories would be small worldwide, Caribbean, Eastern European, trains, planes, and automobiles, and many others. Check with Klaus to find out if your interest is one. When you're done, you simply mail the envelope of stamps to the next person on the list, usually for just regular first-class postage. Hopefully, you complete your selection within a week to keep things moving. I think this is a great, inexpensive way to add to your worldwide collection. It's one of the benefits of belonging to the North Toronto Stamp Club. If you're interested in joining the swap shop, here's a slide of useful emails, or talk or email Klaus, our club president. If you'd like to become a member of the North Toronto Stamp Club, Check out the website, fill in the online application form for membership. Dues for 2023 are only $10, and you can now pay by e-transfer. Thank you for your attention.